And so what I want to do now is try to put a finer point on a point that we heard come up earlier this morning, which is when people ask you, why space? Why spend money on Mars? What do you answer? What do you tell them? Axel, how about you?
I would say that real breakthroughs often require some kind of disruption and really this kind of disruption and this inspiration, and that's really needed. I think just doing the status quo, doesn't really advance us, and so I think space can really provide that inspiration and disruption and getting us all together to think big, and I think that's really needed to make sustainable advances.
Great. Corky, how about you? How do you answer that question?
I think there's one example, but there's, I think, a plethora of reasons why we do. Money that's invested in space is invested to solve problems that we have on Earth. I mean, that's the underlying tenet for NASA's research that we do in space, is to improve life on Earth. So that's certainly one, is because it solves some of those problems that we are. And then I love an example that I heard Mike Griffin talk about once, and that was, Mike was a former NASA administrator and the chief engineer, and his concept was a day without space. Imagine a day without space. And it's like the old 50s movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I don't imagine all the cars would stop, but it would be a global disruption if you had a day without space. So I used the word institutionalized in my earlier presentation. Space is already institutionalized in our lives. It just is. It's already there, and it's going to continue to be in a much greater fashion.
Great. What do you think, Sidney?
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes that startups usually make is to start with a solution, whereas they should be starting with a problem. Because by focusing on the problem, then you can try to figure out what are the best ways to approach and develop ideas and create technology that will solve that problem. So I think when we think about Mars, we think about a set of problems, a set of challenges that will force us to think very deeply about how to come up with or to overcome those difficulties. Right? So I think for us, when we think about innovation, it is really focusing on what are the challenges that you should be facing and addressing, and that throughout that process, we will be coming up with companies, we'll be coming up with new solutions that will have an impact on our planet.
Wonderful. And more companies, more solutions, more people, more diversity, more creativity, all plugging into those various ecosystems. Awesome. And how about you, Melodie? Why space?
I think that the challenge of developing technologies for space lends a framework that is unparalleled in how we introduce disruptive technologies for here on Earth. So the fact that we're working and that we're considering an environment which is the most extreme, most remote, with the greatest challenges is exactly the context that we need to rethink and introduce radical disruptive solutions for things like global homelessness, in my case, disaster and hurricane relief housing. We think about these problems as systemic in a very similar way, and I think that the challenge of developing these systems for space is going to be exactly what we need to resolve these problems here on Earth.